How could I have been taken from my cell fully clothed this morning if I was in my shorts when I was locked up?
At the height of Bewitched, Dick York was a familiar face in millions of homes. Then suddenly, he was gone. Fans felt the shift, but few understood why or what it would cost him. What followed wasn't a quiet retirement or a graceful fade from the spotlight. It was a slow, painful descent that took him further from the life he once knew. And by the time the full story came out, it revealed a reality so harsh, it changed the way people saw him forever. A beginning, fueled by pain. Richard Allen York didn't come into this world with any kind of advantage. Born in September 1928 on Chicago's near North Side, he grew up in a place that looks polished today. But back then, it was tight, crowded, and rough around the edges. Life inside those buildings wasn't much easier either. His father worked as a salesman, his mother as a seamstress, but steady money just wasn't a thing. Jobs came and went, and most times, so did the paycheck. It got so bad that young Richard had to miss school just to stay home and keep watch, basically acting as a buffer between his family and a landlord ready to throw them out. For him, childhood wasn't about playing outside, it was about survival, and the situation only got darker. This was the middle of the Great Depression, and food wasn't guaranteed. Richard saw things no kid should ever have to see. His own father digging through trash just to find something edible, even getting into fistfights with other desperate men over scraps. That kind of environment doesn't just leave marks, it shapes you. Then came a loss that hit even harder. His infant brother passed away, and the family didn't even have enough money to bury him properly. One night, Richard and his father slipped into a cemetery in silence and buried the baby themselves, using a makeshift coffin put together from a shoebox. That moment stayed with him. It was heavy, raw, and something most people couldn't even begin to process. But somehow, through all of that, York held on to a light. He had this natural brightness about him, and music became his way out. He sang whenever he could, and eventually someone noticed. A nun uslish his voice and realized there was something special there, a clear, powerful soprano. She connected him with a vocal coach, and that changed everything. That one introduction opened the door to the Jack and Jill School, a respected training ground for young radio and stage performers. For the first time, life started giving him something back. Even when money was still tight, York had a way of standing out. Opportunities started coming fast. Radio dramas, stage work, he was everywhere. By the time he hit 15, he already had his own show, That Brewster Boy. That's not normal, that's rare air. And while his career was heating up, his personal life was finding its own rhythm too. Through radio, he met Joan Alt, another young performer chasing her dreams. They connected early, built something real, and by their early 20s, they were married. It looked like a solid foundation, but life had more tests waiting for them down the line. York didn't stay boxed into one city. He took his talent to New York, stacking up thousands of performances between Chicago and the East Coast. From there, it was television and Broadway, landing roles in major productions like Tea and Sympathy and Bus Stop. He was building a serious resume, working alongside big names like Joanne Woodward, Jack Lemmon, and Glenn Ford. But even with all that momentum, nothing came easy. When the film My Sister Eileen was casting, the role of Ted was originally meant for Alda Ray. Ray turned it down, thinking it wasn't worth his time. York stepped in without hesitation. To him, no role was beneath the work. He stayed ready. What he didn't know was that one of those roles would come with a cost he couldn't see coming. By 1959, York was on set for They Came to Cordura, and everything seemed normal. Just another project, another step forward. No warning signs, no indication that anything was about to go wrong. Then everything changed in a split second. On one of the final days of filming, he was shooting a scene alongside Gary Cooper, operating a handcar along a railroad track while transporting wounded soldiers. It looked simple, just physical work for the camera. He was locked in, giving it full effort, completely focused. Then the director called cut, and that's when it happened. Right as the scene ended, the controlled movement turned chaotic. In another moment during filming, an extra unexpectedly grabbed onto a stretcher York was handling, instantly shifting the weight. What was supposed to be manageable suddenly became a full 180-pound load pulling against him. York reacted on instinct, trying to stabilize it, but his body wasn't built for that kind of sudden shock. something gave. The muscles along his back tore violently, and the damage went deeper than just muscle. The injury began affecting his spine, compressing his discs over time. What started as one bad moment turned into a lifetime of pain. That was the turning point, the beginning of chronic suffering, heavy reliance on painkillers, and eventually, addiction. His career, the thing he had fought so hard to build, started slipping through his hands. The physical toll was just as brutal. He didn't just feel the pain, he carried it in his body. Over the years, his height dropped from 6'1" to around 5'10" as his spine compressed. That's not just injury, that's transformation. At one point, he was ready to walk away from everything, acting, performing, all of it. It felt like the end of the road, but life wasn't done with him yet. Against the odds, pushing through constant pain, York landed the role that would define him forever. He stepped into the character of Darren Stevens on the ABC sitcom Bewitched, beating out other actors and proving that even after everything he'd been through, he still had something left to give. The hidden blueprint of Bewitched. Through much of the 20th century, Columbia Pictures built a reputation for turning everyday domestic chaos into something funny, light, and a little magical. One of their biggest wins in that lane was Bewitched, a show that made suburban life feel both relatable and otherworldly at the same time. The idea didn't just appear out of nowhere. Its creator, Saul Sachs, pulled inspiration from stories that had already played with that same mix of romance and the supernatural. One major influence was the 1942 film I Married a Witch, which itself came from Thorne Smith's novel The Passionate Witch. That story reached all the way back to 1600s, New England, following a woman named Jennifer, who, after being executed for witchcraft, swore revenge on the people responsible. Centuries later, her spirit returns and targets a modern-day politician, only to realize he's descended from the very people who had her killed. What starts as revenge slowly turns into romance, flipping the whole story on its head. With Veronica Lake bringing charm to the role of Jennifer and Frederick March playing both her love interest and his ancestors, the film set the tone for that mix of magic, conflict, and love that would later define Bewitched. You can already see the blueprint for Samantha and Darren taking shape. But that wasn't the only influence shaping Sachs's vision. Another key piece came from Bell, Book and Candle, a stage play from 1950 that later became a 1958 film. This story followed a modern witch, Gillian Holroyd, who uses magic to start a romance with a man named Shepard Henderson. Everything seems fun and effortless at first, but there's a catch. If a witch truly falls in love, she loses her powers. In the end, Gillian has to choose between magic and love, and she chooses love. With actors like Kim Novak and James Stewart bringing that story to life on screen, it added another layer to the formula. The idea that love and magic don't always coexist peacefully. That tension became a core part of what made Bewitched work. Sachs wasn't worried about stepping on any legal toes either. Columbia Pictures, through Screen Gems, actually owned the rights to both of those earlier stories. In a way, they weren't borrowing. They were remixing their own material. With the concept locked in, the casting process began. Dick York stepped into the role of Darren Stevens, starring alongside Elizabeth Montgomery, who brought Samantha to life. Together, they created a chemistry that pulled in millions of viewers week after week. On screen, everything felt effortless, almost magical. Behind the scenes, though, things told a different story. Reports from the time suggest that Montgomery and York didn't exactly click off camera. While audiences saw a loving couple, the reality on set was far more complicated. York had a reputation for being intense and at times difficult to work with. There were also whispers that he crossed professional boundaries, frequently flirting with Montgomery despite the fact that she was married to the show's director and producer, William Asher. That alone created an awkward atmosphere that never fully went away. Montgomery and Asher's relationship had its own story. They first met in 1963 while working on the TV movie Johnny Cool. The connection was immediate, but the timing wasn't right. Both were coming out of previous relationships and weren't ready to jump into something new. Over time, though, things changed. By the time Bewitched was being developed by Screen Gems executives William Dozier and Harry Ackerman, the two had become a solid couple. Interestingly, Montgomery wasn't even the first choice to play Samantha. The role initially went to actress Tammy Grimes, who turned it down. That decision opened the door for Montgomery, who quickly signed on. Asher joined as a director and eventually became a full-time producer, turning them into one of television's most powerful behind-the-scenes teams. On the surface, everything looked perfect, but cracks were forming, and much of it traced back to York's declining health. That back injury from years earlier wasn't just lingering, it was getting worse. The pain became constant, and to keep working, York leaned heavily on painkillers. Over time, that reliance deepened. There were days when he struggled to stay present, barely able to engage with the cast. For someone like Montgomery trying to carry a show while dealing with that kind of unpredictability, it became frustrating. As the pressure to keep the show running grew, so did York's struggle. When the medication stopped being enough, he began mixing it with alcohol just to get through the day. It was a dangerous cycle, and it started affecting production in noticeable ways. One incident made that crystal clear. York failed to show up for work, sending the entire set into chaos. William Asher reportedly took off himself, driving straight to York's house and banging on the door, trying to figure out what was going on. Back at the studio, everything stalled. Cameras sat idle, schedules fell apart, and tension filled the air. In most cases, that kind of behavior would have ended an actor's time on a show immediately. But York wasn't just any actor. He was central to Bewitched's success, and the network knew it. ABC wasn't ready to let him go. The show was a massive hit, and York was a huge part of why audiences kept tuning in. So instead of cutting ties, the production team adjusted around him. They brought in specially designed furniture to support his back. The cast and crew stepped up too, often helping him move between scenes, doing whatever they could to keep things running. But even with all that support, it was clear the situation wasn't sustainable. The show was thriving in ratings, but behind the scenes, it was becoming harder to hold everything together. William Asher, despite his personal frustrations, understood York's value. He knew York was a key ingredient in the show's success. At the same time, he could see the reality. York's condition wasn't improving, and it was starting to impact production in a serious way. At one point, Asher even considered ending the show altogether. By the end of the third season, both he and Montgomery were ready to walk away. But there was one major obstacle: the audience. Even in pain, even struggling just to sit through scenes, York was still drawing huge numbers. The ratings were strong, and ABC had no intention of shutting down something that profitable. As far as the network was concerned, the show had to go on, but the truth was catching up. No amount of adjustments, special treatment, or determination could fully outrun what York was dealing with. And sooner or later, that reality was going to force a decision no one could avoid. The collapse that changed everything. At the height of Bewitched success, everything seemed to be lining up perfectly for Dick York. The show was thriving, the ratings were strong, and his performance as Darren Stevens had made him a household name. From the outside, it looked like he was set for a long run, but behind the scenes, his body was slowly giving out. Then one day, right in the middle of filming, everything came to a halt. York suddenly collapsed on set. It wasn't minor, it was serious enough that production stopped immediately and he was rushed straight to the hospital. For a show that relied so heavily on its lead, it was a moment that shook everyone. Lying in that hospital bed, York got the kind of news he had been trying to outrun for years. His condition had worsened. The pain, the strain, the damage, it had all caught up with him. Then came a visit from director and producer William Asher, and with it, a conversation that neither man could avoid. Asher kept it direct. He needed to know if York could continue or if it was time to step away. York had pushed himself as far as he possibly could, but there was nothing left to give. When the question was put in front of him, the answer came quietly. He was done. Just like that, his run on Bewitched came to an end. With their leading man unable to return, ABC had no choice but to move forward. The solution was unusual, but simple. They replaced one Dick with another. Dick Sargent stepped into the role of Darren Stevens, bringing a new face to a character audiences had already grown attached to. There was some debate about how it all came together. Sargent later claimed he had originally been considered for the role, but had to pass due to other commitments. Asher, on the other hand, maintained that York had always been the first choice. Either way, Sargent now had the job, and he approached it with his own style. But replacing York wasn't something that could be smoothed over easily. For years, viewers had no idea that he had been performing through constant severe pain. To them, his sudden disappearance created a huge question. How do you explain a character looking completely different overnight? In a move that still stands out, the show chose not to explain it at all. No storyline, no transition, just a new Darren, as if nothing had changed. It was a gamble, but it was one they had quietly prepared for. York's health had been a concern long before his collapse. Behind the scenes, production had already started adjusting. William Asher had scripts written that didn't include Darren at all, just in case York couldn't make it. His absences were becoming more frequent, and the strain on the schedule was growing. Some of those absences had deeper reasons than people realized. While many assumed he was missing work because of his back, there were times he was dealing with personal loss, including the death of his father. But regardless of the cause, the pattern made it clear that the situation couldn't continue the way it was. When the decision to replace him finally came, the reaction wasn't limited to fans. While Elizabeth Montgomery may have felt a sense of relief given the tension on set, the rest of the cast had a much harder time accepting the change. Agnes Moorehead, who played Endora, took it especially hard. She had grown close to York and wasn't ready to move on quietly. On the first day of filming with Sargent during the table read, she made her feelings known without holding back. The room felt it immediately. It was a clear signal that this transition wasn't going to be smooth, and it wasn't. Sargent walked into a situation where he had to win over both the cast and an audience that was still attached to York. The pressure was real, and at times, it got to him. There were moments early on where the weight of stepping into that role showed, especially with Moorehead's initial resistance. But time has a way of softening things. Despite the rocky start, Sargent and Moorehead eventually found common ground. The tension faded, replaced by mutual respect. Over time, that working relationship turned into a genuine friendship. Moorehead, known for her strong personality, even began welcoming him into her personal circle, inviting him to her well-known holiday gatherings. On screen, the change in actors brought a shift in the character itself. York's version of Darren had been high-strung, reactive, and full of nervous energy. Sargent played him differently, calmer, more relaxed, more accepting of the strange world around him. That shift wasn't accidental. By that point in the story, Darren had been married to a witch for years. The shock had worn off. What once felt unbelievable had become part of everyday life. The character evolved, and Sargent leaned into that evolution, bringing a softer dynamic to the relationship between Darren and Samantha. Still, no matter how much the show adjusted, York's absence left a mark that couldn't be fully erased. His version of Darren had defined the early success of Bewitched, and for many viewers, that connection never fully faded. In the end, the show moved forward, the cast adapted, and the audience followed. But behind all the magic and laughter, the reality remained the same. Dick York's body had made a decision that no script, no network, and no amount of determination could override. Dick York died crippled, broke, and homeless. It's heartbreaking. When Dick York stepped away from Bewitched, he didn't just leave behind a role. He walked off with something the network couldn't replace: the loyalty of the audience. Executives thought they could swap him out and keep things moving like nothing happened. But the viewers felt the difference immediately. The numbers told the story. During York's final season, the show was holding strong near the top, sitting at number 11. Once the new Darren came in, that position dropped hard, sliding down to 24. And from there, it never really recovered. The magic was still there on screen, but something felt off, and fans knew it. Still, that kind of reaction wasn't what York wanted. He wasn't sitting somewhere hoping the show would fall apart without him. What stayed with him wasn't bitterness or pride. It was regret. Not about fame, not about the tension behind the scenes, but about not being able to finish what he started. That unfinished chapter weighed on him long after the spotlight faded, because once he left the show, things didn't just slow down, they collapsed. After that on-set breakdown, York's life shifted into a much darker place. For nearly a year and a half, he was stuck in bed, battling constant pain and slipping deeper into depression. The medication that once helped him function had taken over, leaving him trapped in a fog he couldn't control. The pain wasn't just physical anymore, it started invading his mind. He described it like having loud, relentless noise in his head, like something blaring nonstop with no escape. Sleep became almost impossible. And then came the hallucinations. He would hear voices that weren't there, sounds that didn't make sense. At times, reality itself felt unstable. It got so intense that he became a danger to himself. During some of those episodes, his wife Joan had to step in physically, doing whatever she could to keep him safe, even putting herself at risk just to stop him from hurting himself. Seeing what his condition was doing to her hit him hard. That was the moment everything shifted. He realized he couldn't keep going like that. York made a decision that could have gone either way. He chose to quit the medication completely, all at once. No gradual step down, no safety net, just a clean break. To shield his children from what that process would look like, he moved back in with his mother. What followed was months of pure struggle. Withdrawal hit him hard, bringing confusion, fear, and more hallucinations. His mind felt like it was working against him. Even simple things, like the flicker of a television, could set off intense reactions. To cope, he tried anything that might bring a moment of peace. At one point, he used recordings of rainfall just to drown out the noise in his head. It was survival, one day at a time. After about 6 months, the worst of it finally passed. The hallucinations faded, and slowly reality started to settle again. Ironically, when the physical pain returned without the mental chaos, he felt a sense of relief. At least now, things made sense again. Years later, he would reflect on that period in his memoir, laying it all out: the addiction, the fear, and the long road back. But even after overcoming that battle, another reality set in. His acting career, the thing he had fought so hard to build, was likely over. If there was anything that kept him grounded through all of it, it was Joan. She never left his side. Through the pain, the breakdowns, the uncertainty, she stayed. In many ways, his story became just as much about her strength as it was about his struggle. The way he spoke about her later made it clear that she wasn't just support. She was the reason he made it through. But love, no matter how strong, couldn't solve everything. With no steady work, York had to find a way to support his family. He and Joan invested what they had into an apartment building in West Covina, hoping it would give them some stability. On paper, it made sense. In reality, it fell apart. York couldn't separate business from compassion. When tenants fell behind on rent, he didn't push them out. He understood their situation too well. He had lived it himself as a child. But that kindness came at a cost. Without consistent income, the bills stacked up. Eventually, he couldn't keep up with the mortgage, and the building slipped out of his hands. The only thing he managed to hold on to was a single unit. And even that came with a humbling twist. To stay there, York took a job as the building's cleaner. The same man who had once been a television star was now maintaining the property he used to own, scrubbing floors and keeping things in order just to get by. By 1976, things had gotten so tight that he had to collect welfare for the first time. It was a drastic fall. One moment, he had been a well-known face on television, earning a strong living. The next, he was navigating survival, trying to piece together a new reality without the career that once defined him. He didn't pretend it was anything else. He understood exactly how far things had shifted. One day, he was Dick York the star. The next, he was just a man trying to find work, struggling to rebuild, even being turned away from opportunities as simple as directing a school play. It was a hard landing, but it was real. However, even with everything he had been through, that desire to perform never really left Dick York. By the early 1980s, he was ready to try again, hoping for some kind of comeback. He managed to land a few appearances on shows like Simon & Simon and Fantasy Island, small steps that hinted at a possible return. But just as quickly as it started, it stopped. The reason wasn't lack of talent or effort. It came down to something almost unbelievable. His agent had failed to properly register him with the Screen Actors Guild. Because of that oversight, York was effectively locked out of the industry. Just like that, the door closed, and this time it stayed shut. Not long after, his health took another serious turn. The man who once carried scenes on a hit television show was now struggling just to get out of bed. He and his wife, Joan, relocated to a small red bungalow near Grand Rapids, Michigan, a place owned by her family. They were living on a modest pension, barely enough to get by. But this is where his story takes a different kind of turn. Even confined to a bed, York refused to sit still. Instead of focusing on what he had lost, he found something new to fight for. From that small room, with limited strength and resources, he started working toward helping people who had even less than he did. He came across the McKinney Act, a federal program designed to distribute surplus government supplies to those in need. On paper, it sounded like a lifeline. In reality, it was buried under layers of bureaucracy, with most of those resources sitting unused in warehouses. York saw an opportunity. Using nothing but a phone and the name he had built years earlier, he started pushing. He called officials, volunteers, radio stations, anyone who would listen. He asked questions, demanded answers, and figured out how to move supplies that had been sitting untouched for years. All of this while dealing with severe health issues, often relying on oxygen just to breathe. Day after day, he stayed on those calls, raising awareness about homelessness and connecting the dots between unused resources and people who desperately needed them. His body was weak, but his focus was sharp. What he managed to accomplish was remarkable. He helped coordinate the release of thousands of surplus items: coats, boots, blankets, cots, mattresses, basic necessities that could make a real difference for people living on the streets. Social workers across cities like Detroit and Chicago began to notice. Somehow, from a single room, he was cutting through red tape that had stalled entire systems. There were moments where even he seemed surprised by the results. A simple mention of a need would sometimes lead to an unexpected response. Shipments of supplies arriving where they were needed most. It wasn't always perfect, but it was movement. It was impact. He called his effort Acting for Life. It wasn't a large organization with offices and staff. It was a phone line, a mailing address, a handful of supporters, and one man determined to make a difference. His workspace reflected that reality. No fancy setup, just a worn chair in the corner of a living room, stacks of letters from supporters, tapes waiting to be recorded, and a steady stream of calls. People from all over reached out, some offering encouragement, others sending small donations just to help him keep going. And even in that condition, he was thinking bigger. He talked about building networks to distribute supplies across entire regions, about turning unused government properties into shelters. To most people, those ideas sounded out of reach. To him, they were just the next steps. There was a quiet irony in all of it. While he was helping move resources to those in need, his own financial situation remained fragile, and at the same time, his health continued to decline. In 1992, at the age of 63, Dick York passed away. It wasn't the back injury that ultimately took him. It was emphysema, the result of years of heavy smoking. That habit, combined with everything else his body had endured, finally caught up with him. But even with all of that, his story doesn't land on defeat. He had already fought through addiction, endured years of chronic pain, and faced the loss of a career that once defined him. Yet through it all, he held on to something deeper. His perspective, especially near the end, reflected a sense of gratitude that never really faded. For him, the setbacks were physical, the losses were real, but the relationships, the experiences, and the love he received along the way, that's what he chose to hold on to. In the end, his body may have worn down, but his spirit never really followed.